for Movie Spotlight, your weekly ticket to the world of film, from the hottest blockbusters to hidden indie gems and everything in between. And joining us today in the studio are our resident movie critics, Darcy Paquet. Hello, Darcy.
Hi, Alana.
And Jason Bechervaise. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, Alana.
Now, this week we have a new Korean comedy opening in theatres from a director and star who've been quite successful in their previous collaborations. The film is called Heartman, Rock and Love. The director is Chaewon-sup and the actor is Kwon Sang-woo. Darcy, what more can you tell us?
Yes, I mean, when you look at the Korean title, Heartman, it instantly recalls the director's previous film, which was called Hitman and Hitman 2. That movie was about a former special agent who becomes this webtoon artist, and then his two identities kind of collide. And Kwon Sang-woo played the lead in those two films too. And, you know, both of them were really successful. The first one came out just before the pandemic, but was still, you know, a good-sized hit. And Hitman 2 was actually the fourth highest grossing Korean movie of last year. So they've got quite a successful thing going. The new film, it's a completely unrelated story. Like, you know, the characters are different. But I think they decided on this title as kind of a marketing hook. And so,
Okay.
And
Good
actually,
idea.
Yeah.
It's the same studio as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as for the story, it's a remake of a highly successful film from Argentina called No Kids. I don't speak Spanish, but Sin Hios. And this is from a movie from 2015. And yeah, so it is another example of a Korean film company that's kind of looking abroad for story inspiration.
Okay, so we're on a roll here with the remakes. Now, the film's based on a movie, as you said, it's called No Kids. Can you give us an overview of the plot?
Okay, I'm going to skip the opening because I think I can. And Kwon Sang-woo plays a divorced dad, Seung-min, who's raising his elementary school-age daughter. He adores his daughter. She's really just the only thing in his life. And it's established early on that he's not really interested in like dating or looking to remarry. And he's still on good terms with his ex-wife, who's expecting a child with her new husband. But then he runs into his first love, named Bona, played by Moon Jae-won. And, you know, all these years, he's never been able to forget her. It never worked out for them in the past. But now she's returned to Korea from France, and she's just as excited to see him again. So everything seems to be falling into place for, you know, this new kind of midlife romance. But there's a problem because Bona is extremely anti-child, you know, to the extent that she's joined this organization that kind of celebrates life without kids. And, you know, she's really interested in you know, Seung-min, but not if he has kids. And, you know, he doesn't intend to lie at the beginning. Like he kind of, you know, he's intending to tell her about his daughter, but, you know, it doesn't quite work out that way. And so before long, he finds himself dating Bona and at the same time trying to kind of hide the existence of his child.
Okay, so it sounds like that setup kind of neatly establishes both the emotional stakes and the central conflict, kind of framing the film a bit as a rom-com. Darcy, what did you think of the film? Is it funny?
I mean, for me, it was not.
Okay.
Which was a disappointment because I really liked Hitman. I thought it was really funny and, you know, it was quite successful, but you know, it really pulled me in as well. And so, you know, the sequel wasn't bad either. And so I was excited to see another comedy from the same director and same team. You know, somehow this one just, the humor didn't quite land to me. Things felt a little bit forced. I was in a theater that had, you know, it wasn't a full audience, but there was a decent number of people that were there watching it with me. And, you know, I didn't hear a lot of laughter behind me as well.
Okay.
You know, it does seem to be a concept that has some potential. And, you know, apparently, again, I haven't seen the original film from Argentina, but that was a huge hit. And, but I think it's the kind of thing where you really need to pull it off perfectly. And, you know, it's a question of the, you know, kind of the look of the actors and the, you know, the way things are presented. And I mean, for me, it didn't quite hit, but I have spoken to other people who kind of liked it better than I did. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's kind of a hit or miss kind of thing, depending on your personality.
It definitely sounds like an interesting topic to me. You know, many younger people are choosing not to have children here in South Korea. And of course, you know, the falling birth rate is a huge issue. that's getting a lot of debate in society. How does this film fit into that discussion?
It's interesting because it wasn't, the film wasn't intended to comment on that issue, but it does, kind of directly contrast the kind of lifestyle that you have when you have kids and then the kind of lifestyle that you can have without kids. And the main character is kind of, to a certain extent pulled in between them. He adores his daughter. He's perfectly happy in his lifestyle with kids. But then, when he meets Bona, then, he realizes to a certain extent what he's missing, and, he wants to have it both ways, perhaps. But, that is a choice that I think a lot of people make when they're young. And, this is a movie that can at least allow you to kind of imagine both sides. And so it doesn't really come down hard on either side of the issue, I think. I did, in terms of the way it presents families, it was sort of interesting, I thought, having a divorced dad as the main character. I think that's not too common in Korean cinema. And in particular, being so kind of comfortable and close to his ex-wife. They are often in contact with each other, and they kind of, to a certain extent, share responsibilities raising the daughter, although the father takes primary responsibility for that. So that was kind of a refreshing twist.
Jason, did you get a chance to see this one?
I did, yeah. Okay, yeah. It just felt like the film. Yeah, it had this interesting premise, right? As Darcy mentioned, you've got this divorced husband. He, absolutely adores his kid, and then he falls in love with. Let's say he fell in love with this woman a long time ago, and she kind of reappears, and kind of it had like Notting Hill vibes, because he runs a store, and she comes into the store, and then the last scene of the film is definitely a nod to Notting Hill, but it just, I don't know, I felt it just didn't delve into those issues hard enough for me to draw me in. So I just felt it was just kind of running on empty for much of the film, and the laughs just didn't land.
Okay.
There's this funny sequence at the beginning of the film where the main he gets himself into a bit of a situation where he's performing on stage and something happens. That's quite funny. But beyond that, it's just like, I'm just kind of losing interest. And then when we know where it's all heading, I'm not giving many spoilers away to say this ends on a happy note. But the fact that it took the female character a while to forgive, the lie that basically because the dad has to basically lie for much of the film. I didn't really get why it took us so long to get over that. But I mean, she talks about loneliness at the beginning of the film as a child, but I don't know. I'm just like, come on, hurry up and get this film, finished and let me get out of the theatre.
I know, it is the kind of situation that in real life I think would be solved much more simply.
Yes.
Two people sit down, just have an honest conversation with each other. Everything can be kind of worked out, and so the film does have to strain a bit to kind of keep things
just a tad
dramatic. Yeah.
What kind of response is it getting from Korean viewers, and what are its box office prospects?
I think there are some people who liked it more than me. I've found, more positive reviews out there. Overall, the response seems so-so. It hasn't managed to catch up with, the film from last week that has been on top of the box office, When We Were Us. And so it opened at number 3 on its first day, sold 27,000 tickets. And, that's way down from what the Hitman films did. And so I think they probably will be disappointed.
Well, from a light romantic comedy, we turn now to a very different kind of Korean film. Jason, your pick this week is the Korean animation The Square, that is set in Pyongyang, North Korea.
Indeed. So, one of the great strengths when it comes to animations is you can set it anywhere. And, there are no shooting restrictions as such. Based on what I read, the animation took close to 6 years to produce. Extensive research was conducted to make it as real as possible. It's based on Chae-In-hoon's novel of the same name, and it's directed by Kim Bol-sam. It's a graduation project at the Korean Academy of Film Arts, otherwise known as KAFA. Yeah, I mean, essentially the story is quite simple as a setup. It's centered on a Swedish diplomat who was a first secretary, and he falls in love with a North Korean traffic officer. But when he knows, well, they both know that he will eventually have to leave the country. But he does apply to be reinstated for another year. Now she suddenly disappears, and so he seeks help from a translator called Myungjun, and he's been watching them closely, and he's under pressure from his bosses to prevent them from meeting again. But the two of them, the diplomat and also the translator, they have an interesting friendship as well. And so the translator's torn between his loyalty to the regime and being a friend. And it premiered at the Udine Far East Film Festival as I think it was the closing film, if I'm not mistaken, Darcy. And it screened at a number of festivals throughout the world, including Annecy International Animated Film Festival, which is kind of dubbed the Cannes of animation, and it won the Contretemps Jury Award there. So voices include Jung Ho-jong, Lee Chang-yong, Lee Ga-young, and Yu Jun.
Well, listen, I think it's safe to say you don't often see, many animations set in North Korea. What kind of picture does it paint of the country?
It's interesting because, a lot of, I've watched a lot of Korean movies, and, they look at North Korea in different ways. And, often it is depicted as a very poor place. But here it focuses more on the relationships, the friendships, and there are references to the surveillance. There's also this major theme of loneliness as well. I read that the director drew much inspiration from an interview with a Swedish diplomat who experienced much loneliness in North Korea. His only way to relieve stress was cycling, through the empty streets, and you see that in the film. So it's kind of, if we tie loneliness to the first movie, there is a common thread here, although here it's definitely tackled in a much more meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely an interesting perspective. Like, as you said, rather than focusing on the material hardships that were often presented with from North Korea, the film is leaning into these themes of isolation and loneliness, and especially from a foreigner's point of view. Jason, was there anything that didn't work for you?
Okay, I really like this film overall, but it was a little bit, I don't know if Darcy agrees with me here, but I just found it a bit disorientating initially because they're speaking Korean. And I'm like, this is Swedish diplomat. Now, there is a reason for that. His grandmother was from Korea, but I don't know. And then they're speaking in Korean, to each other in the embassy, and it's kind of, and so it took me a while to kind of, get used to that. And I understand why. Obviously, they've got a Korean cast, and when they're speaking Korean, it sounds very, very natural, kind of very, very natural Korean. And also the North Korean dialect as well for the North Korean characters. But so I wasn't so much keen on the opening few minutes, but that's just because of my personal experience, kind of finding it a bit disorientating. But once I got into it, actually, I was really moved by the whole thing. I think it's really, really layered, and it's so beautiful. I love Korean animation. Especially some of the animations that are coming out of CAFA, the Korean Academy of Film Arts. And so it really did work, there are so many different films in North Korea, and this certainly stands out for just focusing, like I said, on loneliness, and you mentioned isolation. So, I think that's one of the really interesting things about it. And it's only I think it's just over an hour long, and so it just, it goes by really, really quickly. And it's a really interesting movie. I was quite moved by the whole thing, actually.
Darcy, you were actually at the film festival where this movie premiered. How was it received?
It was received really well. The director was there together with his wife, who was his primary collaborator with this film. She kind of oversaw a lot of the visuals, and he kind of oversaw the whole project, including the story. And I think that there is kind of a fascination with North Korea because it is, a forbidden place in that sense. We most of us can't go there and kind of directly experience it. And for the director himself, it's not like he has been there and he had the opportunity to walk around and do location scouting and everything else. And so, much of it was planned out kind of by, through internet searches. And he said that it was really helpful to kind of look at Instagram accounts from people who had visited North Korea, and then to get, images that weren't kind of the stock images of North Korea, and a bit more about ordinary life. And, I think that his perspective is interesting in this sense, because a lot of the stories about North Korea that you see, like documentaries, for example, that are shot by people from Europe or from other countries, it kind of starts from the perspective that North Korea is this strange place and unknowable place, and isn't this wild? And whereas I think that the perspective of the filmmaker is really understanding, both in terms of the Swedish diplomat, and we do really get a sense of his loneliness and how it feels to be constantly surveyed as you're trying to lead an ordinary life. But also it doesn't kind of feel like it's directly criticizing the North Korean government. It does certainly show the effects of living under that kind of a system, but it felt more understanding. And so that gave the film a bit more of a depth, I think.
Before we wrap up, Jason, you said that this is a film from KAFA, the Korean Academy of Film Arts.
Yeah.
What does this say about Korea's animated film industry?
Well, it's obviously overshadowed by Japan and Japanese anime, which is going through a boom at the moment. But yeah, there's some really interesting films emerging, particularly out of KAFA. I watched a documentary on KAFA, and there was debates about whether they wanted to continue with the animation as a major there. And I think it's punching above its weight, perhaps even more so than, the live action features at the moment. So it's really interesting work that's coming out of there. There was Park Chae-bum's Motherland in 2023. There was Kim Yemi's Climbing from 2021. And, loads of shorts as well. So, this film, The Square, I think it's one of the best Korean films I've seen. This year. We've just started, but it's still my best.
2 weeks in.
Yeah, 2 weeks in. I'll mention that now. It's clearly, these films take so long to make. They require so much patience and so much work. And and I think it's really quite moving, and it's different. It's not your typical movie that delves into North Korea, and just those images of people walking through these deserted streets, and it's something really unique. It's got a really unique ambience there that I think you don't ordinarily see in a Korean film. So, and I think the fact that it's animation, that allows them to do it, because it's obviously set in North Korea. So, want to see a lot more of these animations coming out of KAFA, and I think the success of them on the festival circuit suggests that will probably continue. I would hope, anyway.
And that's where we wrap up this week's Movie Spotlight. Thank you to both our film critics for joining us. Darcy Paquet, thank you.
Yes.
And Jason Bechervaise.
Thank you.